Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for coming. This is the last stop on Craig's nationwide book tour. And I'm so excited that he's ending it here with us at the greatest little bookstore in the world, Binnacle Books. Round of applause for Binnacle Books. They do so much great work. Not only do they have incredible books, they know books inside and out. They do great work like the Beacon Prison Books Project, where incarcerated people can request books to read and customers buy them and they get sent and delivered. It's just a beautiful thing. So you can find those books inside and buy those too. So Craig Mod. So Craig has done, you've been on the road for 6 weeks. You have done like 100 podcasts, including some really big, strange ones.
Supposedly, yeah.
Tim Ferriss, the guy who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, you were on his podcast. And I feel like I've listened to all of those and I've read all of Craig's work. So I just want to give like a little bit of an introduction to Craig and who he is and what he's doing. And then I want to let Craig kind of kick his feet up and do like story time with Craig, because Craig is a really beautiful storyteller. So this is Craig. Some of you might know him very well. Some of you might not know him at all, like Laura. But that's the nature of Craig Mod. He is a guy who's from right around here, grew up right around here, and then he moved all the way across the world to Japan. And kind of in the space between those two places, he's made this fascinating career. And he's just one of the smartest, loveliest, most thoughtful guys you'll ever run into. And if you read his work, you'll really fall in love with him, which is why people line up around the block in San Francisco and come out during a thunderstorm in Beacon. So I'm really pleased to be here. His new book is called Things Become Other Things. And Craig, over the years, has produced a ton of writing about technology, books, and all kinds of stuff, including a huge body of writing about walking around Japan, which is a really deep kind of spiritual practice that he does. And he's produced these gorgeous art books on his own. And this book is his first kind of traditional New York publishing world book. And it's kind of grown out of all that compost of his walking. And it's really gorgeous. So we're gonna do a little reading from that. And then we'll hear some fun stories. I think we should start by respecting the rain, because Craig's book starts with a kind of apocalyptic typhoon, the Great Typhoon of 1888.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just a really punchy little beautiful poetic paragraph that I think we should read. Do you want to read it or do you want me to read it?
Go for
me. Okay. All right, this is the opening of his book. They say the Great Typhoon of 1889 filled the air of Key with a mythic kind of rage. Meiji 22, the black skies cracked, and down it came. Waters rocked, rivers rose. That towering torii of Hongu Grand, fell hard. The Holy Land went all mush. They say, earth unstuck, undulated like the ocean. Above, 3-legged oily rascals wheeled and cawed and surveyed the slop. For when that divine mayhem of all-penetrating wetness finally pulled back, they say Hongu had been reduced to a slurry. Mud, mud, and more damn mud. Shrines and homes swept halfway down the peninsula, shattered, floating off into a dead still sea. The end. It's pretty good, right?
Thanks, Sam.
Standing ovation. This peninsula is one of the wettest places on Earth.
Yeah.
Wetter than the Amazon rainforest.
That's what Wikipedia tells me.
I've been there. It was raining so hard the whole time.
Yeah.
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 And there is a lot of kind of danger and death and decrepitude and a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And you had some hairy moments. I wondered if you could tell us the story of the time you almost fell off a cliff and died.
Sure. So there's a lot of routes. So the Key Peninsula has probably what's most famously known as Kumano Kodo. And so there are 2 UNESCO World Heritage walking routes in the world. One is the French Camino, so it starts in On the other side of the Pyrenees, you walk over into Spain, walk all the way to Santiago. That's kind of UNESCO World Heritage blessed. And then the other is the Kumano Kodo, which is on this Kii Peninsula. The Kii Peninsula is a peninsula south of Kyoto in Japan. And the Kumano Kodo, unlike the French Camino, although these pilgrimage paths are tricky because everyone's kind of trying to get to some holy spot. So on the Kumano, they're all trying to get to Hongu Grand Shrine, and then on the Camino, they're all trying to get to Santiago. You have lots of different Caminos, but the one that's kind of UNESCO'd is the French one. That's the one kind of everyone walks when they say they do the Camino. And the same thing with Kumano Kodo is that there are many. There's the Ohechi, Nakahechi, Kohechi, Iseiji, and the Omine Okugake Michi. And the one that everyone kind of walks is the Nakahechi, which is pretty relaxed. Although an Australian woman died on it like 2 years ago. It's tricky. It doesn't look like it's going to be tough, but some of the parts of the path are quite skinny with kind of big drop-offs. But what really gets you is you kind of trip, fall, and then hit a tree. And that's what you don't want to do, yeah.
And these are pilgrimage routes that go back like 1,000 plus years.
Because this is, a lot of this is Shinto, which predates a lot of, the Buddhism and stuff like that.
And you describe in its heyday, it would have had 100,000 people walking this.
Yeah, one of the Japanese to Portuguese dictionaries from the 1600s describes the routes as kind of ants, because it was you just would see, you couldn't see the ground. There were so many people kind of like squished and walking. So it was, me walking them today, or anyone walking them today, you're kind of walking the worst version of them in a weird way.
Right.
It's like the least walked, the least populated, the inns, the tea houses, all that stuff is sort of not there as it was even 70, 80 years ago. There you could kind of get to a summit in the mountains down on this peninsula, and there'd be a tea house where you could have like little dango, like pounded rice cakes and some tea. But so the walk that almost killed me was the Omine Okugake Michi, which is the route that ascetic pilgrims use to train. So it's an ascetic training ground for Shinto kind of pilgrims. A long, long time ago, if you wanted to go to these shrines, you needed a guide, and most of the imperial family wanted to do these kind of pilgrimages, and so they needed a system to kind of train Boy Scouts, essentially, like old style Boy Scouts. And so they do training, and this is one of the routes you do training on, and then if you did a good enough job, you got a license. And so my friend John, who features heavily in the book, my buddy John, who is just kind of the smartest, kindest, he's 20 years older than me, he's lived in Japan forever, he's been walking Japan since he was 17. He's a real sort of mensch, kind of magical Forrest Gumpian life. It's like everything that positive that could have happened to this guy has kind of happened. And so he was like, let's go walk this ascetic training route. And we didn't really prepare for it because we'd walked everything else and it wasn't that bad. You look at the map and it was 10 kilometers you had to walk on day one. And it said 7 hours it took. And we're like, it's not going to take 7 hours. And then you start, and every single step you have to pay attention to because nothing is flat. Nothing is easy. It's all rocks. It's crazy terrain. And then you're kind of on these ridges that are, it's like hundreds of foot drop off both sides. And it's like mist shrouded. And there's nothing to hold on to. There's no railing. And so it's really hairy. So I never write about or talk about this route because I don't want anyone to go do it. Because it just feels like this shouldn't be a place that tourists kind of go and play on. And there's another weird element to it, which is it's one of the only bits, I think it's the only route left in the country that has a no women allowed rule, which dates back 1,000 years. So they have, you can walk to a certain part, and then from this part there's this huge torii gate, and it says no women past this point. And what's really cool is that the sign is always vandalized, and so they cross out the no and they write men, and they do it's like always being vandalized by someone. And I tell everyone, just go, because it's not like you walk past that and suddenly it's all these really serious men, really studying and doing their practice. It's a bunch of ding-dongs drinking beer. It's like anyway, that bit is a little strange, but you keep going and it gets more and more intense. And one of the bits, super skinny path, and it was just lined with bamboo grass, the edges of it. And so you couldn't really see where the path ended. And I was walking and I just missed the edge and I went flying off and grabbed, there happened to be one route right there on the path at that moment, and grabbed it. And it was, 100-foot drop onto just boulders. And, you're in that moment, it's this weird, Mission Impossible Tom Cruise moment. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And you're hanging off and you got your pack on, which weighs 20, 25 kilos. And so it's like the momentum and everything is
What's
really
that, like 300 pounds?
It's like 12,000 pounds.
Okay.
It's
He's
like
always talking in kilos and kilometers. It's like really pretentious.
and anyway, that was there, and I was able to pull myself back up and didn't die. And I went back a couple years later to photograph the route. I went to go find it and like take a picture of that one specific.
Did you find it?
I did, yeah.
I don't think I've seen that photo.
Yeah. Anyway.
Good story. Next one, another very scary story that
Okay.
I'm so glad. I was so pumped when I read your book and found this story in there because I've been kind of secretly sharing this story with a lot of people, and I didn't think I was supposed to tell it probably.
Okay.
But then you published it out into the world, and so I was like, now we're free. We can all hear the story. So please tell us about the time that you were walking in Japan with Jeff Bezos.
Oh, God.
And do the impression of him and what he said for the people. This is the most this is the best distillation of America I've ever heard.
So I do these walks. We need some context. So I met Kevin 15 years ago, and I had no idea who he was. Who here doesn't know who Kevin Kelly is? Like most people, right? Yeah. So he co-founded Wired magazine back in the 90s. And he's a techno-optimist. He's written all these books, and like the Wachowski siblings have like used everyone that was in the Matrix had to read one of Kevin's books, for example. And like, anyway, he's really, really big in China. Like he'll give a reading in China, and there'll be like 17-year-olds with his tattoo on their arms and stuff. It's very bizarre. But Kevin's a big walker. He's been walking for his whole life. And we started walking together about 10 years ago. And then we started running walk and talks around the world. So we'd invite 6 or 7 people, and we'd go. We walked southern China, Thailand. Sam joined one of them. We walked Bali. A year ago, right now, we were just about to go.
That's right.
Right about now. Yeah. Bali, we've done a couple in England and a couple in Japan. And somewhere along the line, Jeff Bezos found out we were doing these walks.
Kevin Kelly is kind of like a guru in Silicon Valley tech world. And people
heard about our walks. And so I get an email from his team, and they're like, hey, Jeff wants to walk with you. And it's weird.
Yeah.
It's super weird. But you're like, all right, well, he's like, he can only come for a couple days, which we normally don't allow. And so he's just going to come for like the last 3 nights, 4 days of the walk. And we're like, all right, we'll make an exception. Because every night what we do is we walk 20K in the day. And then every day we have a dinner so-called Jeffersonian dinner. So it's one table, one conversation. And we talk for 2 or 3 hours about this one thing. Everyone talks. Everyone talks one at a time. And it's pretty amazing. You do that 6, 7 nights in a row with a bunch of people you've never met before. And you get really close. Like you just find out a lot, and then all day you're walking together, and you can kind of chat more about it in the day. It's actually a really amazing kind of experience. You enjoyed it, I think. Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah.
Ours was the most intense. We did it in Bali, and there were no rooms, and every night we slept on a bamboo platform in the middle of the jungle, and it was just
nets.
beds next to each other, and we didn't sit in a chair for a week. There were no chairs. We were just all lounging, but it was good. So Jeff says, I want to come, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, he shows up. It's as weird as you can imagine it being. It's so weird.
It's weirder.
Like we had 5 days. We had 5 days without him, and it was so incredible. And we had this beautiful bonding, and everyone was so real, and just such great, honest, open, real people. And then Jeff gets out of his cab right in front of Hongu Shrine, and this switch flipped of like some weird alpha monkey arriving in the tribe, and everyone just started laughing really loudly at everything. It was bananas. And Jeff famously has a completely crazy laugh. If you search Google Jeff Bezos, you get all these videos of him laughing. It's totally insane. And everyone started mimicking it. Anyway, we're walking around. I'm kind of guiding reluctantly. I really don't like to be a guide on these things. We're walking around, and we turn a corner, and the biggest Shinto Tori gate, so those big gates with the 2 things on top and the 2 poles, usually red. The biggest one in Japan, it's like 40, I'm going to say meters. It's like 100 feet tall. It's this huge thing made of steel. And we turn the corner, and I go, hey guys, we got the crew, everyone's laughing like hyenas. I go, hey, this is, and it's like really impactful. I go, hey, this is the biggest Tori gate in Japan, in the world. And Jeff he kind of talks like this. So it's really nuts. It's like he just has this like really wild, intense talk. And he turns to me and he goes, that's the biggest in the world? And I go, yeah. And he goes, let's build a bigger one. It's like, oh my God, what is going on? So I didn't have to sign an NDA or anything, so I don't think I can get sued by telling
It's
you
kind
that.
of amazing that you didn't.
I know. No, and there were no there were sort of armed guards nearby all the time, but you sort of didn't know. And then in the mountains, I don't know what was going on.
And his girlfriend was there.
Yeah, there's a whole thing going on.
Anyway, big sacred gate he sees and says, screams, let's build a bigger one.
Yeah.
Boo. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just glad it's out in the world now. A huge part of the beauty of your writing, in this book, all your writing really on these walks, is there's so much life that you encounter and that you distill for us, and there's so many people, and when you're on these walks, you're so kind of hopped up on curiosity and love, and you have a great line in the book, like, I want to kiss everyone in the world on the forehead. And there's just all these loving encounters with strangers who live in these kind of rural areas, farmers, shopkeepers.
Yeah.
And you kind of do them the honor of paying deep attention and just kind of bringing them to us as people on the page. So I was wondering, one of them that I particularly loved, one story, was this retired logger who was in his 80s, who had never before. Remember this guy? Tell the people about this encounter.
So this is with John.
Yeah,
right.
This is with your friend.
So John. So before I started doing the walks alone, and the book is about a solo walk, and I find even one other person joining a walk changes the vibe completely. And I can't write, I can't photograph, I can't really talk to people in the same way. And so before I started doing my solo walks, before I built up the confidence, I walked with John. John kind of invited me to go explore the peninsula. He was sort of the first, he's doing a sort of academic research, and he really put it on my radar. I had never heard of it. I never knew what the Kumano Kodo was. I'd never heard of Koyasan, none of this stuff. And John, for the first couple of years, we would do, a couple of months out of the year, we'd be walking together. And I was kind of always just watching John, witnessing John. And he's got beautiful Japanese. He's done tea ceremony for 40 years, which is its own sort of subset of language that you use in tea ceremony. And he kind of brings it to the countryside and uses it on farmers. And you just see everyone get moved by this kindness of John.
I was wondering, you describe really beautifully in the book how he speaks to people in this kind of very elevated Japanese, very formal. It would be like if we were speaking Victorian English to someone and they were just so moved and honored and touched.
Not freaked out by it.
Not freaked out, but it was, and people just open up to him immediately. And you're watching this. Can you do an impression of John? Can you give us a sense of what that sounds like, or is that impossible?
It's sort of, you sort of use different conjugations, and it's just things kind of get longer. But a big part of it too is historical knowledge. So he's like a walking encyclopedia about where we'd be walking that day. And that's also embedded in what moves people. So by paying attention to the place, it's funny, it's very easy to make people feel seen and loved and kind of excited about where they live, is if you know something about the area. You kind of go and ask probing questions that you would only know if you'd studied or know
you
history.
Unlock people. So this logger.
Yeah. So we go to this, basically a little bar that we'd been walking past for years and never had the courage to go in. And we were staying in around the corner from it. And I was like, all right, tonight, let's go to that bar and just see it was called Cobalt. It just looked so cool. It was this old bar. I'd been there since the 60s. In the middle of nowhere in this town, just logging town. And we go in, and there are 5 people can sit at the counter. There are 3 people sitting there, and John and I sit kind of in the middle. And John is next to an old guy, and I'm next to 2 guys. And John just has this thing where I call it the John effect, that people fall in love with this guy constantly. It's really, in some ways, inspiring. In other ways, just it shows how much of a deficit you have as a human, that people aren't doing this with you to the same degree. Anyone who kind of likes me along the road, I'm like, oh man, if John was here, they would like us so much more. So we're sitting there, and I'm kind of chatting with the owner, and I look over, and John is deep in discussion with this guy who is about 85 years old, tiny, weird little logger guy, completely alcoholic. Everyone's just totally juiced up. And they're talking and talking, and then suddenly he's stroking, he's picking up John's big fat arm. John's this pretty big dude. He's got these huge meaty forearms, and he's with all his hair on. He's Australian. He's just kind of rubbing John's arm, stroking it. They're deep conversation. And then the clock hits 8:55, and apparently he has to be home by 9 and call his kids or they won't let him go out. So he stands up And he declares to the bar, he goes, "This is the first time in my life I've ever spoken to a foreigner." He's like 85. And he goes, "I used to think they were ferocious, scary beasts, but now I know that's not true." And he leaned over and he kissed John on the cheek and like waddled out of this bar. And it was just a perfect John moment. That's just what he gets an 85-year-old logger to like be in love with foreigners and give them a kiss.
Yeah.
So I learned everything that I'm doing, like what you're talking about, trying to elevate people and just meet people and find this goodness. I learned that all from watching John for 2 years, essentially, and seeing, because I'd never had that modeled for me.
Right.
That's another big part of the book is that anti-model.
Exactly.
Model.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go next, was that you mentioned a sort of sense of deprivation that people must have to need to respond so strongly.
Yeah.
And you write a lot about how you grew up with that deprivation. And in the way this is a book about society and about the success of society versus the failure of society. And in your story, your town that you grew up in is just a really stark, dramatic example of kind of a failure of society. You have a great line that's like, how could I ever trust a country that would do this to a town?
Yeah.
Right? It's this post-industrial place where the factories that employed everyone for generations have closed, and that vacuum gets filled with no social services, no
fentanyl.
Community gets filled with fentanyl and other toxic things. You write about that in a really beautiful way, and a lot of the book, I won't give away the story, but it's written as a letter to Craig's childhood best friend, who they kind of grew apart, and Craig went off on this wild path to Japan, and his friend stayed home. And you write about it very tenderly, and I was wondering if you could read for us a short little chapter that I loved about your grandfather. Sure. Your grandfather, who is the most fascinating fact. You know what I'm going to say.
Go for it.
So Craig moved to Japan, knows a lot about Japan, is immersed in Japan. His grandfather grew up in the era of World War II and all that, and has such a visceral hatred for Japan because of the American propaganda that he tell the amazing fact about your grandfather.
He never ate rice for the rest of his life. That was his revenge against Japan. I have to say, I'm adopted, so that's a big part of the story as well. As more and more I talk about adoption and meet adopted kids and parents of adopted kids, the more you realize it's a real complicated mess, the whole adoption situation. It's so hard to do it well in the sense of helping an adopted kid kind of get through. There's so much bizarre trauma, even if the parents do their best and provide a really loving environment. There's so many questions, all these taboos, because you don't want to offend the adoptive parents by searching for your birth parents and things like that. It's so tricky to do. Statistically, part of this podcast thing, I went on an adoption podcast, and I never engaged with that world before. It's called Adoptees On, and this woman, Haley, has interviewed like 400 adoptees, and she's encyclopedic about adoption data. And it's something like 4 times greater risk of self-harm, suicide. There's a massive drop-off in having children for adopted kids. So there's a lot going on there, and part of that was Japan, and going to Japan was kind of responding to all of that tumult that was happening along with everything in the town. Sure. So anyway, this is my adoptive grandfather.
Yeah, so there's a lot of toxicity back home, and there's a lot of kind of prickly characters, but you also write so beautifully about them. So yeah, if you read this chapter called One Quick Walk, which I've drawn a heart next to. I drew hearts all over the margins of Craig's book. I just think he's so cute and lovable.
All right, One Quick Walk. And my friend that I've written to is Brian. Brian, here's something I never told you. My grandfather used to invite me on walks around the neighborhood. Come, walk with me, he'd say, as he put on his overcoat and hat. I always declined, though in my heart I wanted to join. From my second-floor bedroom window, I'd peek out and watch him stroll with measured elegance down the driveway, turn the corner, disappear. And I'd immediately feel bad about having said no. How simple, I thought, how simple it would be to just walk next to Pop. But I also thought about the other kids. I thought about being seen. I thought about what that might mean, me walking with my grandfather. Stupid, yes. But there it was, this fear, keeping me from doing something so simple from giving him this kindness. Nearly 20 years later, I had built a life in Japan and came back to visit. We went to our local steak place, the place we always went for special occasions, my visiting being the big one, and ate our well-done, forever well-done, leathery steaks. On the car ride home, I sat in the back next to him and held his hand. A hand I should have held much earlier. Later, at home, I heard him tell my mom, Craig held my hand. He was crying. This dumb thing, this holding of an old man's hand. I knew he would be gone soon, and he was.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And standing ovation.
Such a weirdo.
There's such a resonance then in your walking in Japan, and one of the things that I really love about this book is the way that it very kind of artfully and subtly flips back and forth between this world of Japan and these walks and this world that you grew up in, and the story of Brian and the story of your family and the story of these people who you run into. And because, you say the demographics of Japan are pretty stark these days, especially in these areas where the young people have kind of disappeared. And so you have all these closed shops and empty homes and this aging population, and you're running into grandparents, grandmothers and grandfathers, and you're having this deep connection with them just in passing. Maybe you could tell us about the guy who showed you all his frogs. It's just like, there's so many encounters, but this one really stuck with me because it was just a great example of an older person just kind of being seen and being so...
So this guy, he was a iron worker, and he'd kind of welded his whole life. And then in retirement, he started a cafe in his kind of old welding garage. And it was really good. It's a really good cafe in this weird town that should be way, way more active than it is, but it's kind of all fallen apart. And if it was, in the States, there'd be really nasty stuff happening. But because there are essentially no drugs in Japan. This is I think an important piece of data. There's no weed. Weed and heroin are classified identically. It's so strange. I even feel bad. I feel nervous talking about weed in public because if Japanese media hears me talking about weed, I feel like that could be this hugely negative thing on the fact that I'm not so staunchly against it. You'll be talking about something that seems so progressive in Japan, and you'll just bring up something and be like, oh, isn't it funny that weed is, marijuana is so illegal here? And they'll look at you like you just said, oh, pedophilia should be illegal. It's so intense, these feelings around drugs.
Okay.
So there are no drugs in these places. So that means there's kind of a lack of a certain kind of ambient violence and pain and suffering and stuff like that. And anyway, this guy built this great little cafe in this town that kind of has almost no one in it. And I'd spent the morning there kind of having coffee and taking notes and stuff. And I said, hey, I'm going to take off. And he goes, oh, do you want to see something? The customers are kind of thinned out. He goes, do you want to see? I was like, yeah, sure. What do you got to show me?
What did you expect at this point?
Honestly, he was so gruff and mean to me. I didn't know what was going to come. I was so delighted that he was talking to me. He seemed so disinterested in connecting at all. I had tried, and I was like, all right, I'll just let him be. And he goes, come. And it was pouring outside. And he sprints through the rain. And I'm chasing him down this little alley. And we go into his backyard of this house and into this garage and up these stairs. It's pitch black. I'm like, this guy's going to murder me up here in his garage. And we go up and he turns on the lights, and it's just all these Christmas lights encircling the room. And the room is just filled with hundreds of iron frogs, little iron frogs. And he just spent his life making these iron frogs, and they're doing judo, and they're climbing the Tower of Babel, and they're meditating. And he walks me through all. He's like, look at this one is playing tennis.
How big?
They're this big.
Okay.
These little
made of iron, and he's welded them together.
He just kind of welded these iron frogs together.
Are they different colors?
They're all painted, and they're all hand painted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's a life work of frogginess.
Yeah.
And he's got these light bulbs all set up to kind of make it dramatic, and it was very moving and intense. But yeah, that's just one of many, many, many encounters I had like that.
Yeah, I should say this. Craig is an incredible photographer, and this book has black and white photos in it, but he also does these special project books on his own with these really lush, huge, colorful layouts. Do you have your red book around?
I don't know.
You can order them from his website, and they're really stunning. I was just looking through the kind of companion piece to this which has a photo of these iron frogs.
Yeah, you could see them.
Yeah.
In the new book that just came out. Because I'm insane, I released a photo book 2 weeks ago in the middle of this tour, so you can grab that.
Craig is endlessly inspiring to me because he's always, I think he feels, we talked about this earlier, he feels like a lot of us feel, where he's looking at his own life and output and thinking like, oh, I should be doing so much more or something. Whereas I look at it and I think I've never seen someone more like driven and organized and doing more, just making stuff happen and doing all these projects. And like when he does these walks, he'll start what he calls a pop-up newsletter, where you give him your email address and he says, I will not abuse it, I will not sell it, I will not use it past the length of this walk. You will get updates on the walk, and then the thing is over.
Every day I'll do 20, 30, 40K of walking, and then I get to my inn and I'll write.
That's 90 miles.
It's like 20 miles of walking or whatever. Yeah. And thank you for translating. And then I'll get to my inn, and then I start the night process, which is like 4 or 5 hours of writing and photo editing. And so I'll write 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words every night. And I'll do that for 30, 40 days in a row. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the drafts of where the books come from.
The book grows out
essentially,
of that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, most of it gets cut, but it's just kind of like, oh yeah, you can pick this thing out and that thing out. Did you find the language strange at all? Like the way people talk in the book?
Did I find the language, the dialogue of people speaking to you? Yeah, you do a nice thing where, I mean, you should tell everybody how they speak and what their accents are like, but you do a kind of like Americanizing of like country American folk slang. They use slang, they use, and I guess that's the equivalent of what they sound like in Japanese to you?
Yeah, because a lot of translations of Japanese, it's all Tokyo Japanese.
Right.
Like everything kind of just gets transposed to the most generic version in English. And as soon as I started going to this peninsula, as I discovered the peninsula, I was also spending a bunch of time in Western North Carolina. My dad, my adopted father, who I had essentially was a stranger to me, he passed away in 2011, and I got this call, hey, you got to come bury this guy. And you could have picked a stranger out of the phone book, and it would have been a similar experience to going to this house that I didn't know, in this town I didn't know. And one of the weird things that happened, the magical things that happened, and again, like kind of, I believe, if your antenna are up, there's really incredible connections to be made, almost every situation. And in the town, tiny town, Tryon, North Carolina, I don't know if anyone knows that, yeah? Your parents live there. It's a beautiful little, like nook. Asheville's right around the corner. You got some great B&Bs and all this stuff. Anyway, my dad was sort of in the forest in Tryon, living alone. And then when I went to go bury him, I met the one lawyer. The town has like one lawyer. When I met him, he was like 75. And he was this fascinating, essentially a good old boy who supported Bernie Sanders. That's the only way. Like a brilliant Southern lawyer who'd never left the town. And he was a full hyper-liberal Bernie supporter. And we just started hanging out. He'd been a terrible father. He has 3 kids. And he was basically a complete alcoholic, terrible father until his 40s. And it was just a lawman. He's like, everyone wanted to shoot me. I had to have a gun because all those guys wanted to kill me. All those fuckers in jail wanted to get out and get me. And I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Who are you? And I think he knew I didn't know my dad, and I didn't think my dad loved me. And I think he saw it as this opportunity to bridge us, my father and me, in his death. And then also at the same time, he sort of saw a little bit of atonement in this act of kindness with me and my dad as sort of an atonement for how he had been as a father to his own kids. But he sort of like adopted me, he and his wife. And I kept going to Tryon over and over and over again to kind of take care of this house and the whatever, his records, polka records and stuff like that. And they started taking me out to go on hikes in the mountains. We go up the Blue Ridge Parkway, go to Little Switzerland, go to the bookstore there, go to all these cool places. And I just loved them and found this incredible connection unexpectedly and fell in love with that part of North Carolina. And then his wife passed away a couple years after that. And I kept going. My dad's stuff was all done. I kept going once or twice, 3 times a year to just go visit this guy, Bill. And I'd go down there and I'd rent a car and I'd pick him up and we'd spend like 5 or 6 days together. And he listened to his stories. And, 4 or 5 years into it, finally his sons were like, dude, who is this guy you're hanging out with? And so we finally met, and I think they were like, who's this guy from China coming out here? Why is this boy from China keep visiting our poppy? Why is he visiting our daddy? I think they're like, is he trying to have sex with our daddy? Is he trying to fuck our daddy? There was no world in which they could imagine that we had just become weird friends. He's 80 years old. I was like 35. And we just loved each other. It's a strange, bizarre friendship. And so anyway, we'd have dinner with the sons, and that all kind of kept going. But as I was walking the peninsula, I just saw this immediate connection between the tenor, the vibe, the way that Japanese was spoken there, and this kind of Western North Carolina. There's like a sing-songiness to it, like a beauty of poetry to it, and the same in the Japanese. And I just thought, oh, this is a pretty natural transposition.
So in the book, those people speak in a country Carolina accent.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's fun.
Yeah, there's just these great little moments where you walk past a lady who doesn't even look at you, and you try to say hello, and she doesn't even look up, and then you hear her say as you walk away, what does she say?
Goes, they done saw a bear yonder, or something like that. It's like the equivalent of whatever that would be in Japanese, which, there's all these weird perversions that happen to the language when you kind of get into the mountains.
What is your Japanese accent like?
Just Tokyo.
But do you sound American? Do you have
on the phone, people kind of don't know. They're like, are you from Osaka? But the more time I spend in the peninsula, I start to pick up a lot of it just kind of infuses, and when I go to North Carolina, I start picking up a weird little southern thing.
Say y'all?
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned getting in trouble in the Japanese media for talking about drugs. Craig is kind of a figure in Japan, in certain parts of Japan for sure.
Accidentally
a very famous person. So maybe you could tell everyone about your journey with this city called Morioka.
Sure. So I was doing these linear walks. So I'd walk Tokyo to Kyoto. I've walked that 3 times, and I've done other 1,000 kilometer, 400-mile, 500-mile walks. And I wanted to do something that was different. So I wanted to go to 10 mid-sized cities that no one ever goes to, and walk 50 kilometers in each city over 3 days, and just try to talk to as many people as possible.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I walked a bunch of cities, and one of the cities was Morioka, and then I write sometimes for the New York Times, and they do a 52 places list, and they asked me, hey, do you have a place you want to recommend? Not Japan, anywhere in the world. And I was like, well, this city, I've gone to Morioka. No one, at that point, it had been like 23 years of living in Japan, 22 years, and no one had ever recommended it to me, no one had ever said the word to me, Morioka, and it was kind of like Beacon, to be honest, just like this beautiful, walkable little city with history. And
where is it relative to
north?
Tokyo?
So it's up north. Okay. So it's in Tohoku, kind of north of Sendai. So it's in between Tokyo and Hokkaido, basically. Okay. And kind of a beautiful park and amazing cafes and great food and just young people building businesses. And because I'd walked all of these other bits of Japan, I'd seen the depopulation. I'd seen how dour and dire it was. To find this bastion of energy and goodness, it was like, what is this? And we need to protect this, to understand this, and highlight it. And so I recommended it to the Times. They don't tell you if they're going to pick it, and you write your 200-word little pitch. And I pitched it, and then they're like, yeah, okay, it's going to be in there. And then you don't know where it's going to be. And then the list comes out. And that year, number 1 was London because of the coronation and all that stuff. And then number 2 was Morioka. And Japan lost its mind. Japan did not know what to do with that. And then someone found out I spoke Japanese, and it was just this tidal wave of media, who are you and why is it number 2? Because my name's on it, and they're like, this is the guy who picked Morioka. And they were finding me in the street. I was doing this other project. I was in hotels, and a TV crew would come into my hotel room, and I'd be sitting in the corner, and there'd be cameras and lights and stuff. It was so bizarre. I had gone from 0 media to 1,000% media. And then the mayor invited me up. He goes, come on up, love to just say hello. I'm like, all right, I'll just go say hi to the mayor. I wanted to go back to the town, see how everyone was doing. I go up there, and I'm expecting, okay, go meet the mayor. His handlers come get me. And I thought we were just going to shake hands. And they opened the doors. I'm like, the mayor's in here. And they opened the doors, and the doors open, and it looked like this. All of you, except you were all media. And you all had giant network TV cameras on your shoulders and giant SLRs. And it was flashes are going off. And I'm just like, what is, and the mayor's in the back. He's sitting on kind of a throne in the back. And I go back there and I sit next to him, and everyone's like, they follow me, as I walk in. It was so bizarre. It's like I've been part of the Manson murders or something. It was so intense. And we shake hands, and he basically just goes oh yeah, hey, thank you, Moldo-san, for, whatever, picking us. And then good luck. And then he left me. in front of all these news people. He just took off. And there's a mic, and they all line up for questions. And the first question, guy gets up there, and he goes, Moto-san, how do we solve poverty? And I was like, you've got the wrong guy. This is not, I just like your coffee. I think you have amazing coffee and good scones. They have really good scones up there. I don't know why. It's a big scone thing. And so it just became this crazy circus. And more TV shows wanted me on. And I saw it as truly, there was no ego involved because it's like I didn't do anything. I just pointed. And so it's like, it's not like it was something I made. I was just like pointing over there. I felt an ethical duty to help them understand it. And then I realized there was an interesting opportunity to talk about certain things. So they always, all the questions would be, what's your favorite noodles? Or like, what's your favorite soba? How much soba did you eat when you went to Morioka? That's all they wanted to know. And I would go, I ate a bit of soba, but what I really loved was the national health care that enabled all those cool shops to exist. And Japan has a really great social infrastructure, like you can't fall that far, but no one really recognizes or understands it. And it's just kind of funny to bring that to the surface and get people talking about it and realize how lucky they are that you can run a small bookshop with a family and not think about insurance and healthcare and all this stuff. And you can have this community hub that, can evolve organically. It's a really inspiring thing to be part of and bear witness to. And so I was able to kind of transmute this crazy media thing into sort of a political awareness of all these social services and how great it is for these towns.
Yeah. Hey, my alarm's going on. So we've been talking for 45 minutes, which means we're going to open it up to some questions and do about 15 minutes or so of questions. I didn't get to ask about the haunting story in Tibet where a ghost appeared at night and you were rocking a baby in your sleep or something, but so if someone wants to do that for the Q&A, go for it. So yeah, let's take a handful of questions and see what we can get through if anyone has any.
Just talk about the ghost. No, it's sort of a
He doesn't. Okay, it's too long. He doesn't want. He was asleep in Tibet, and then his girlfriend was like, "Last night I was trying to wake you up. I couldn't wake you up. You were rocking a baby or something."
No.
And then, let me tell the story. And then she took the baby from his arms or something, and then he woke up and felt okay. And then I know this is not right,
this is the worst telling of this story.
And then the next morning they went to the guy who ran the inn, and they're like, something weird happened last night. He's like, oh, did you see the woman holding the baby who was a ghost in your room? And then Craig was like, yes, she was in my body, and then stuff like that. It's a really good story, but it's a little bit long.
You can listen to it on the Tim Ferriss podcast.
Yeah, listen to that podcast.
Yeah.
Craig is great on podcasts. Okay, so he did the ghost. Any other questions for Craig? Yeah.
For the Jeffersonian dinners, what are the kind of topics that you discuss, and who gets to decide the topic?
Great question.
Yeah.
So on these famous walk-in talks that Craig does with Kevin Kelly, for the Jeffersonian dinners,
They are. Why?
the Jeffersonian dinners. What topics do people bring up, and who gets to select the topics?
Yeah. You've been on one. Do you want to?
I went on one. I mean, the Jeffersonian dinner, to be honest, was one of the reasons I was always resistant to go on one of these walk-in talks, because it just sounded structured and like corny and whatever. But it did turn out to be great, and we had incredible discussions, and it wasn't as strict as I was led to believe.
Yeah.
But I mean, they ranged from everything from.
Well, your question was.
My question was amazing, but it was also interesting because it was very controversial. One of the guys in our group hated my question so much he secretly went to Kevin Kelly after Kevin announced my question that we'd be discussing at the next dinner. He went to him and said, I hate this question so much. Why would we waste our time? I'm so angry. This is not what I came here to talk about.
He didn't say that to Kevin. He said it to the whole group at the dinner table.
Well, he said it to Kevin first. He said it to Kevin, and then Kevin at the dinner, I was ready to discuss my fun question, and Kevin was like, before we get into the question, I want to say someone at the dinner had a real objection to this. And then this guy starts going like, yeah, what the hell is this question? Why would we ever? So the question was, my favorite conversation starter, which is just very simple. What is your very first memory in your entire life? Okay, and that's it.
And it turned out to be a great.
It was awesome.
It was so
I
revealing.
thought.
Kevin's was like a
Oh my God.
beautiful sunlit underneath the tree with a leaf floating down with a paternal, loving father figure off to the side. You could feel his presence as this leaf just floated down from above.
A maple helicopter seed pod, and it was his grandfather who like never spoke to him or something. It gets really like moving, and then you just start to ask questions like, "Oh, what was your relationship to your grandfather?" And it just turns into this whole like therapy session. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. So that's one example. What are some other examples?
What is something you've changed your mind about? It's sort of like one that comes up. We do one called "What's one of your heresies?" So which is something that you believe in that probably the people around you may not agree with. So I have one that I say, which is like all parents should be legally responsible for and receive the same punishment as their children until they're 25 for anything their kids do. And like people are like, no, you should do that. Or it gets weirder and weirder.
Some are extremely specific, and some are just, what is the best life advice? What is a great sort of little tiny hack in your life that has improved your life? I buy the tiniest mechanical pencil. It's called the Otto Minimo. It's it's like a piece of lead with an aluminum sheet. It's like this big, and I always have it in the book I'm reading, and I'm underlining and writing, and it's just like my greatest happiness in life. So stuff like that.
Yeah.
What is Kevin? What? You were going to say something about Kevin?
No.
Okay, so that's it. Good question. Anyone else?
But basically, each person in the group gets to pick one of the nights.
Yeah, so
and
everybody's responsible for
and sometimes there's a little pushback, and sometimes Kevin's very good at going, well, that's probably not a good question.
Kevin,
He kind of guides
the question sometimes. He is a real sunny optimist, and so some of the questions he interprets as too negative, and he makes people rephrase them.
And his presence kind of brings this weird, like, wizened gnome.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of behaves and probably abides by the rules better than if Kevin wasn't there.
Someone wanted to ask, how has everybody kept themselves from being ruined by success? And Kevin was like, that's far too negative. Why would anyone ever be ruined by success? And it got rephrased to like something about regenerative success.
Right. Or there's one where it's like, what was the angriest you've ever been, and how did you overcome that? And Kevin will say something like, I've never been angry ever in my life. Not once.
Yeah.
And you just go, I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I've seen you were angry yesterday. Sorry.
I was wondering, when you're walking, do you bring technology with you? Do you use technology? Do people in the group use technology? Do you use it to navigate?
Yeah, the question was, how do I use technology on the walks? How much do I bring? Do I use it to navigate? Things like that. When we do the walk and talks now, we're kind of explicit because I think actually was it Bali? No, Thailand. Every time we stopped, everyone was pulling out their phones, and we'd never had that before. So now we say, please, like, put your phones in your bags. And some people think, the whole week, we had someone on Bali that didn't even turn their phone on once the whole time, right? Yeah. And so we try to not do that. When I do my own solo walks, I have rules. So no news. I'm not allowed to read the news at all. No social media, no podcasts, no music. Because the idea is to not ever teleport. So you always have to be as present as you are. And the boredom is kind of, for me, what generates a lot of the writing. And so as I'm walking, if I'm not doing this stupid stuff, my brain just starts processing and writing and sentences. So I'm transcribing a lot. So I use AirPods and I have a little script I can like say to the AirPods, and it'll append to a text file for me. So I can just be walking and start talking. And so by the end of the day, when I do the writing, when I'm writing 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words, I'm referencing that text file all day. I've been kind of transcribing notes and things. And that is really important. And I have an Apple Watch just for the maps. So again, I don't ever have to touch my phone, and no notifications, nothing turned on for it. So that works pretty well. I find that that's good. But I want to be as offline as possible. I did this thing in the 2020 election. It was Biden and Trump. And the walk started a few days before the election. I told all my friends, like, don't tell me what happens. And I had this fantasy because it was so crazy here. Everyone was, the news was so insane, and everyone was, kind of losing their minds. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be walking, and the election's going to be done, and a farmer is going to yell, did you hear? Like, Biden got it. People are just going to be going nuts in the middle of nowhere, Japan. That was my fantasy of it. And the election happened, and no one said anything. I was going in shops and cafes. I was talking to farmers every day. Not one person said anything about the election. It was really shocking. It was just bizarre. So 2 weeks later, you were the person I texted. And I said, all right, what's going on? Because I told everyone not to tell me. So it's sort of an interesting exercise to do these kind of forced disconnections from these cycles. And I found it to be enlightening for me in a way to kind of keep a grounding and regenerate, and then to be able to, you kind of then get back plugged into it, and you can kind of face it in a stronger way, I find, more kind of meaningful way, as opposed to just being like, oh my God, everything's falling apart, being in that state 24 hours a day, which is kind of what we are right now, unfortunately.
Okay, I saw a hand back there. Yep.
Now that you have found your family,
My birth family.
you walked with your mom in Chicago.
Yes.
Are you going to take your mom and your sister on a walk?
So the question was, now that I found my birth family and I walked with my mom in Chicago, someone's been listening to Rich Roll and to Ferris, and I have. So last summer I met my birth mom for the first time. She was 13 when she got pregnant, so she's pretty young. And we kind of connected, and it took a while, on Ancestry. Anyway, long story short, we finally met last summer in Chicago and went to lunch. And I had been completely anonymous through all the communication. She didn't know what I looked like, or didn't know anything. And I saw her, and I knew kind of everything about her. And I was like, oh, hi, I'm the guy, And we go inside to the steakhouse and sit down in a booth. And the first thing she does, and look, like 13, like that's not consensual. So my whole life, and I knew this about her, that she was 13. And then the birth father, there had been a car accident and then a fight at the scene of the car accident, and then he was murdered. So my Genesis story was so demented, right? It's like, okay, there was a rape, this guy's murdered. And that was like, that's what I come from. That was sort of the story that I carried with me for 43 years. And I sit down with my birth mom, and the first thing she does, she opens her wallet and takes out a baby photo of me that the adoption agency had given her. And she goes, I've been carrying this my whole life. And every year on your birthday, I think about you and who you've become. And I pray for your happiness and that you have a beautiful family and all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, oh my God. And she just started talking more and more. And the pregnancy, she claims very enthusiastically that it was consensual. She's like, I was 100% in, and yada, yada. What, put that aside. So it wasn't quite as terrible a thing as you might imagine. But also, like she just said, I was so supported in the pregnancy, and my aunt and uncle were there for me, and I was getting, prenatal vitamins, and I went to this other high school, and I was given a mentor, and all this great stuff. And so that whole story starts to get rewritten, and then she starts to talk about her story. And she's a computer programmer, it turns out. And I have a degree in computer science, and she's this kind of fierce entrepreneur that's just hacked and pushed and pushed. And it was the first time in my life, the family that adopted me was very kind, but I never for a second really felt of them. And it was always this kind of weird distance there. It's like, they don't get me. They don't understand. Even today, they just don't get what I'm doing at all, in a way that kind of has always hurt. And sitting across from this woman and hearing her describe her life, and every decision she made was the decision I would have made. And how I've kind of moved through the world, it was like, oh my God, this is where my brain comes from. It was so bizarre to sit there and feel that. And then kind of have this Genesis story rewritten about, you don't come from murder. And I go, well, what about Dad? What's the situation there? She goes, oh, he's alive. He's in Florida. And she goes, he was 22, and I didn't want to deal with the court stuff and the police. So I picked a random guy who'd been murdered out of the newspaper and said, that was your dad.
Yeah.
So very industrious, 13-year-old.
He still owns the film rights for this, too.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Any producers out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome to negotiate with my agent. But so that's been a pretty weird thing that happened. And then part of that was finding out I had a sister. She's 28. She lives in Alaska. And part of this book tour has been meeting family members. So in New York 6 weeks ago, my aunt and uncle came up. I met them for the first time. And they're like, hey, we want to take you to lunch. And I was like, sure. And they're like, we're going to take you to Benihana. I was like, great. I've never been. It's like, this is not Japanese food. Whatever they served us was not, that wasn't even Asian food. That was just slush, just slurry of weird food by a guy he was not into it. He dropped his flippy thing and got sauce all over the floor. It's pretty hilarious, but they were fun to meet. They were pretty wacky. And then my sister, who didn't want to connect at first, which I was fine with. I'm like, this is all really heavy. And then 3 months later, she reached out and said, oh, actually, I'm willing to talk. And we did a video call, and immediately just realized we liked each other. She's super cool. She's got like a nose ring and cool tattoos, and she's an elementary school teacher, and she hates social media, and she's married to this really good guy, Mark, who seems like a super good dude, and they have a dog, and they go hiking all the time. And they said, hey, we want to come meet you on the tour. And they flew down to meet me in Seattle. And the night of my book event in Seattle was the first time I met my sister. It was getting pretty intense to have that right before you go on and do the event. And then the next day we did a hike in Seattle up to Rattlesnake Ledge. And they planned it all. And they're huge hikers. They were like, we want to go canoeing and hiking. I was like, let's just pick one. And it was pouring rain, like just total torrential downpour. And she was just like, let's do it. Yeah. And I got an umbrella. I'm the only guy on the mountain with an umbrella. Everyone's giving me weird side eye. Like, who is this guy's not from Seattle? And one other guy had an umbrella. And we were like, yes, Umbrella Brothers. And they're just soaked. And her husband, who's in the National Guard, was like, I think we should turn back. This seems dangerous. And she's like, no, we're going to the Rattlesnakes Ledge. So we did that, and just great. She's really amazing. And with the adoption stuff and the birth family stuff, there is so much baggage, especially with the parental stuff. I'm an only child, she's an only child, and I think as soon as we kind of connected and realized the other person wasn't hopeless, wasn't a complete ding-dong, we were both like, whoa, actually having a sibling is pretty cool. And like getting it when you're 28 and 44 is kind of funny. So we're sending texts, and she's like, hey bro, can I call you bro? So it's turned into this kind of cute thing. My birth mother wants to take me on like a hike in Switzerland. So her sister lives in Switzerland. There's like all this stuff going on. So I don't know, we'll do a little walk at some point. But that's been the sub journey of this tour, has been to do the book tour, but also I've met my aunt and uncle. My birth mother was at the Chicago show. Some guy right behind her asked a question like, what's the most intense adoption thing you experienced? She's right in front of him. I met my sister. It's been fun. My cousin lives in Brooklyn. He's worked on shows for like HBO and stuff. He's a poet. It's kind of neat. Yeah, cool. Fun journey.
Okay, we should probably stop so that Craig can sign some books. You gotta go buy this book. You can get them inside the bookstore.
Yeah, I'll be sitting in the back room inside.
He signs it and he has a little stamp. It's really cute.
Yeah, you get numbers. I've been numbering every signature on the tour.
Yeah, so thank you all so much for coming. And thank you to Binnacle Books, and thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Laura. And the bookstore. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for the sound. Thank you, Maritza.
Thank you to God for no rain. Stopping the rain right on time. Thank you.
All right.
That's who does that.
Okay, good. That's a good way to end, theologically.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
That was fun.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you, man.